Hi guys, I just want to take a minute to talk a little bit about this video before it gets started. My philosophy on things I find is often different than a lot of other people I know. I want to do as much as possible myself. I know a lot of people think that you should either buy new items or let a professional do it. But every professional that's done any task hundreds or thousands of times had to have that first one when they started. So I will take a chance, I'll take a risk of losing money, and as you'll see in this video. And in my philosophy, it's not always a complete loss because there is the education value, what I learned by doing it. And that's what I wanted to point out in this video. While I, confess that I make mistakes, I try to always make the best of it. And there is educational value in making mistakes. You can learn from it, move on, and do better the next time. My videos are not meant to be how-to videos. This is more me documenting what I'm doing. Primarily to share with my daughters who live out of state. So I want to keep them up to date on the build, on the Nova and the engine, so they can feel connected to it. So anyway, I hope this is enjoyable. Please like, share, subscribe, give it a thumbs up. I hope you enjoy the video. Have a good day and God bless. Even though they looked to be in good condition, the heads that came on the 1972 small block Chevy 350 engine were not what I wanted for my 383 stroker build. My research showed these heads have a 76cc combustion chamber, which leads to a lower compression ratio. Also, they are lighter casting and prone to cracks. And most important to me, they have poor airflow. I found a pair of used Vortec heads with an intake manifold for sale online. When I went to look at them, I found they'd been sitting outside for some time and were extremely rusty. I almost walked away, but I wanted to learn and to do the machine work on the spring bosses and the rocker studs myself. I have never torn down a set of heads before. In the past, I have always taken complete heads to a machine shop and then picked them up when they were ready to bolt on. I figure if I messed up on the machining, it would be better to do so on a cheap set of heads, so I bought them. The first thing I needed to do was to get them cleaned up some before I could even start to tear them down. I had some POR rust remover on hand, and I bought a tub with a lid to put the heads in. I poured the 2 gallons of POR rust remover in and immediately wished I had had more. I would like to have completely immersed the heads. The POR was approximately $27 a gallon, and I was already using 2 gallons on this experiment, but I was writing it off as a learning experience and an educational expense. I made do by rocking the tub often, flipping the heads over, and switching their position in tub over the next 48 hours. I then pressure washed the heads and started the tear down. I'll show the results of the POR rust remover in just a minute. Overall, I was happy with how it performed. I just needed more of it, and I'm sure the heads would have benefited from more time in the solution. I removed the nuts, rocker arms, and pivot balls, keeping them all in order and together, although I was certain I would never reuse them. I was just trying to develop good habits while tearing down the heads. The next step was using my new valve spring compressor to compress the springs one at a time so I could remove the valve locks, spring retainers, and valve springs. Finally, I removed the valves, again keeping everything in order and separated per head. Removing the press-in rocker studs was a real challenge. I don't know if it was worse due to all the rust on these heads, or if what I dealt with was pretty much standard. The typical method of removal is to stack washers on the rocker stud all the way up to the top, leaving just enough room for a nut. Then, as you tighten the nut down, it pulls the stud up out of the head. These were so tight that my battery-powered impact wrench could not budge them. It's really hard to believe that the additional valve spring tension from a higher lift cam could work them loose, but I guess it must be true. I tried using a breaker bar to tighten down the nuts with some success, but it was slow, so I went to a local box store and bought a corded half-inch Milwaukee impact wrench. The difference it made was amazing. I immediately began removing rocker studs. Unfortunately, I also began to twist off and break rocker studs that were stuck in the head. I had to use a die to thread what was left of the rocker studs sticking out of the head and apply some heat from a butane torch to get those out. It was a long, tedious job, but eventually I got them all out. Here's a look at the stripped heads that spent 48 hours in the POR rust remover. You can see they are better than they were, but still far from good. Before taking them to a machine shop, I decided to give them another bath in rust remover. I had discarded the POR 15 rust remover after the first soaking. Perhaps it could have been filtered and reused. For the second bath in rust remover, I bought a 5-gallon bucket of Evapo-Rust for about $80. That comes out to about $16 a gallon, compared to the $27 a gallon for the POR rust remover. Five gallons still wasn't enough. At least 2 more gallons would have been needed to completely submerge the heads in the container I was using. This time I soaked the heads for a week, flipping the heads daily. Here's what the heads look like after a week in evaporust. You can see they are actually starting to look like usable heads. I shipped the heads off to a shop that specializes in cast heads for racing. After inspecting the heads, they notified me that one of the heads was cracked and had been leaking coolant. It could be fixed, but it didn't really make sense as the cost to fix it would equal that of a new head. I now have approximately $300 invested in this set of heads, and only one of the two heads is usable. Again, I put this down as an education expense. I did learn a lot going through this process that I would not have learned had I just bought new heads from the start. It is the work and the learning, as well as doing everything possible myself, that I enjoy. It also gives me a better appreciation of the cost of having this type of work done by others. Once you have pulled 16 rocker arm studs and had several break during the pull, you understand why a machine shop charges what they do. I don't regret what I did, but I won't start with such a nasty set of heads the next time. I'm sure there was a reason these heads were pulled off of an engine and left to set out for so long. Lesson learned. I bought a new set of bare Vortec heads and had the race shop go through them. They did the valve job, checked the spring pressures, and assembled the heads. These heads have the standard 194 intake valve and the 150 exhaust valve. The shop did some porting to both the intake and the exhaust bowls. They machined the spring seats and guides, threaded the rocker stud holes, and installed ARP rocker studs in the Manley guide plates I provided. The heads were then resurfaced to the original 64 cc's. Manley springs, retainers, and locks were used. They also cleaned and fitted the intake I bought with the original set of heads. I'm not sure if I'm going to use this intake on the Nova build or not, but it doesn't hurt to have it sitting on the shelf. For the money I spent on these heads, I could have purchased a set of aftermarket aluminum heads with higher lift, better airflow, and reduced weight. But the theme of the build was to be old school as much as possible, and I wanted it to look under the hood pretty much like a stock 350, only with a lot more horsepower. Here are the flow numbers for my new Vortec heads. My advice to anyone starting a project like this is to sit down and write down what you want to do with your vehicle. Is it going to be a back to the original restoration or a resto mod? Is it going to be a street car or a race car? Trying to do a street strip combo increases the complexity, and every decision is a trade-off and a compromise. What is your budget? If this is your first build, expect it to cost double or more what you think it will cost, depending on how realistic your numbers were to begin with. Do you plan to do the majority of the work yourself or pay someone else to do it? If you are paying someone else, double that budget again. Are you a perfectionist that can't accept less than the best? Or are you willing to live with some mistakes by doing it yourself and mark it down to education? I'm convinced it's actually cheaper in the long run to go buy a vehicle that is finished just the way you want it than it is to build from scratch. Even in classic car restorations, I've had several people tell me that they spent between $20,000 and $30,000 on a restoration and that their vehicle was only worth half of what they spent. My opinion is that a vehicle is worth whatever it is worth to you, no more and no less. For me, it's not as much about the destination as it is about enjoying the journey. Wherever this journey takes me, I will be the one driving. Thanks for watching. God bless.